Before I started researching, really didn't know much at all about Tajikistan. It's a country here in um, Central Asia, and I'll show you a more close-up view. So it borders China and Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, and yeah, it's it used to be occupied by Russia or the USSR until about 30 years ago. And here are just some key facts. So their population is about 10 million, which is around the same size as Greece or Sweden, and it's very mountainous. It's 90% of its land is full of mountains, and Islam is the main religion by quite a large margin, with over 99.5% being Muslim. Um, there are only about 70,000 Christians, which is around 0.7% of the population, but the majority of this Christian figure is Russians and Armenians, so there aren't very many Tajik believers at all. In fact, there was a figure by the Joshua Project which said there's around 0.00% Christian of the Tajik ethnic group, which is the majority ethnic group in Tajikistan. So there may be more Christians who are secretly believing, but it's a very, very small figure. And so I'd just like to share a few prayer points for Tajikistan. First of all, there are very, very few churches. First of all, it's really expensive and difficult to register churches, and only registered and state-controlled churches are allowed. And so if they aren't state-controlled, then local authorities and police, they can detain believers and raid church meetings, confiscate Bibles and things like that. And in fact, an example of this is a few years ago, a pastor was arrested and imprisoned for 3 years on false accusations of singing extremist songs in church and so inciting religious hatred. So these police are finding excuses to arrest Christians. So there is quite a lot of persecution as well from families and some, especially converts from Islam into Christianity. They're faced with the worst persecution. Sometimes they can get locked up by their families and beaten and could get expelled from their communities. And so I would just like us to pray for God to strengthen these Christians who are having such a hard time. Some good news is that there are some who are spreading the gospel. Some Tajik believers are going into Afghanistan because the culture and the language is very similar to help share the gospel. So that's the first prayer point for the existing Christians. Olfa, could you turn on your microphone, please, and pray a prayer for this prayer point?
If you can. Hi.
Okay, hi.
Can I pray in Arabic?
Yeah, sure, that would be fine. Whatever you're more comfortable in. Thank you.
نحب نشكرك يا رب على البلاد هذه، نحب نشكرك يا رب على كازاخستان يا رب وتيك، انك تزور البلاد هذه، انك يا رب المؤمنين المسيحيين موجودين ديجا غادي تعزيهم يا رب، وانك تعطيهم ثبات وقوة ايمان وقت الصعيب اللي تعدلوا به، وقت الاضطهاد رب، من كل تعصب تحميهم، الدولة تمارسوا عليهم يا رب، إنك تكون أنت عونهم وقوتهم وتعطيهم ثبات أكثر حتى ما يشوفوا يا رب نهضة بك أنت يا رب، مع المؤمنين يتباركوا ويتضاعفوا يا رب، وتباركهم وتبارك عائلاتهم، تبارك أحفادهم والأجيال الجاية يا رب.
Amen. Yeah, thank you. The next prayer point is for the perception of Christianity to change within the Tajik society. So, Islam is seen as part of the Tajik identity. So, being Tajik is being Islam, it's taken for granted. And leaving Islam is seen as a betrayal. So, it's very difficult for Tajik believers to come out and share and tell people around them that they are Christian because it's very it's not usual. It's not yeah, it's not something usual to be something other than Islam. And also, I mentioned before that Tajikistan used to be occupied by Russia, and so there is a lot of hurt in their history because of um, some of the terrible things that the Russian occupation has in their history. And Christianity is still seen generally as a Russian religion, so it has that negative stigma on it. And also, the government sees the Protestant church as a sect with one goal to spy and destroy the current political system. So, there is this very negative view of Christianity in Tajikistan. And so, yeah, I'd like us to pray that this stigma towards Christianity can shift and that people would be more open um, to God and wanting to know more and not just seeing it as um, yeah, something that's impossible, something that's a sect, or something that has brought a lot of hurt to their culture and history. And so I'd like Hyun Imo, if you could turn on your mic, sorry, and
Yeah.
pray for this prayer point. Thank you.
Can I pray in Korean?
Yeah, okay.
하나님 아버지, 이 나라의 기독교에 대한 오해와 그리고 또 정말 그 아픔에 대해서 기도합니다. 하나님, 우리의 그 죄를 용서해 주시고 주님의 빛과 주님의 그 참사랑이 이 땅을 우리 기독교를 통해서 다시 덮을 수 있도록 도와주세요. 하나님, 정말 그 또 역사를 통해서 또 기독교인이라고 생각했다 말하는 사람들이 그 저지른 죄를 하나님 정말 용서해 주시고 이 땅에 또 많은 무슬림들이 하나님에 대해서 제대로 알고 나아올 수 있도록 그들의 마음을 열어주시고 또 비춰주세요. 하나님 이를 위해서 또 많은 사람들을 살고 또 하나님께 정말 헌신한 그리스도인을 통해서 나라를 다시 한번 하나님 더 알아갈 수 있도록 도와주세요. 이름 기도합니다. 아멘.
Amen. Thank you. The last prayer point that I want to talk about is for more Tajik people to come to God. And I mentioned at the very beginning that Joshua Project said that 0.00% are Christian of the Tajik ethnic group. And Tajikistan is actually the most Muslim country in Central Asia, and it's one of the most unreached countries there. Um, and yeah, so I like to pray for God to show miracles and dreams and just to show Himself, to soften the hearts of the Tajik people group so that more people can come to know Him. And also, another prayer point would be for more people to be touched, to want to go out to Tajikistan and maybe through business or through a charity organization, because Tajikistan is a very underdeveloped country. So there are like non-religious charity groups that can go there, but through those organizations, there could be people who are sharing the gospel to this extremely unreached people group. Yeah, so Ali Reza? Okay, I don't think Ali Reza is in the call right now. So, Seb, could you pray for this prayer point, please?
These Tajik people can find your love. Sort of without hindrance, and that although there may be resistance against you, Lord, that we can show charity and love, and these Tajik people can find this charity and love, and that they can bring it into their culture, not to displace their culture, but actually to bring it together and live harmoniously with it. And that we pray, Lord, that the Tajik people, they reach out to you, Lord, and they find your way, a new way, a truth way. Yes, Lord, and we pray that this can all be done peacefully and respectfully in a gradual manner, not to disrupt the country and bring it into chaos, but to bring it towards love, Lord. Yes, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
So that was the end of my little prayer session. So yeah, thank you. And God bless Tajikistan.